morning, Rabbi.
We are preparing for Shavuos, for Matan Torah, and we're going to learn a little bit about the way in which Torah was given and the way in which it was transmitted. But before we turn to the words of the Rambam, let's refresh our memories, or perhaps learn for the first time, three machloikos, three different disputes in the Gemara, which relate to the chronology of the giving of the Torah. There really are three different issues we have to discuss. Number one is, when was the revelation at Har Sinai? Number two, when were the mitzvahs given? Number three, when was the text of the Sefer Torah given? And these are three different issues. The first issue as to when the revelation was is a machlokas from the Gemara and Shabbos, whether the Torah was given on the 6th of Sivan or whether the Torah was given on the 7th of Sivan. This is a dispute which relates to the revelation of the Aseres HaDibros. We know there was a Maimon Har Sinai, there was a public event at which HaKadosh Baruch Hu communicated the Aseres HaDibros to the Jewish people. So there's a machlokas in the Gemara, Rabban and Rabbi Yosei, whether this was the 6th of Sivan or the 7th of Sivan. The Rabban say it was the 6th, Rabbi Yosei says it was the 7th. The Gemara relates this to a halachic dispute in the laws of Thu May and Torah, because the Jews had to prepare themselves, be in a state of purity to receive the Aseres HaDibros, and therefore there's a debate exactly what that required. And curiously enough, in this debate, we pass on like Rabbi Yosei. And therefore it follows that we are of the opinion that Torah was given on the 7th. Of course, this is the basis of the famous question of the Magen Avraham: how is it we observe Shavuos on the 6th and say it's Matan Torah Seinu? That's a question which is, for now, best left on the back burner. But that's the first dispute. When were the Aseres HaDibros communicated? Either it was the 6th of Sivan or the 7th of Sivan. This was not when the Taryag mitzvahs were given. The Jews did not receive the Taryag mitzvahs that day. They received the Aseres HaDibros. The Taryag mitzvahs were given later. And therefore, for example, I'll give you an example of a vertel which seems to get this issue confused. As we know, there's a custom on Shavuos to eat milcheks, dairy foods. So the question is, what's the basis of this custom? So there are all sorts of conjectures and reasons given. So there's a vertel that goes like this, that the Jews knew they were going to get the Torah, and therefore they prepared a lavish banquet in anticipation of the Torah. What did they prepare? They prepared all sorts of meat dishes. Bear meat, lion meat, giraffe meat, who knows, they prepared. And then they got the Torah and they discovered that everything was treif, not kosher. So on a short notice, what could they prepare? Milcheks. Therefore, to commemorate that, we eat milcheks. Now, it's cute, for what it's worth, but it doesn't make sense, because the laws of the kosher animals were not revealed at Maimon Har Sinai. We received the Aseres HaDibros. Even according to the famous Medrash, which is developed by the Ramban, that all Taryag mitzvahs are included in the Aseres HaDibros, I think we should understand that it means that after the fact, you can take the Taryag mitzvahs and you can put them under the 10 headings. But it's not that if you start with the Aseres HaDibros, you can then figure out the Taryag mitzvahs. So the Jews on Vav Sivan or Zayin Sivan had no idea which animals are kosher, which animals are not kosher, and therefore had they prepared the feast of bear meat, they could have eaten it too. And therefore we have to look for other explanations for the custom of eating milcheks. By the way, just as an aside, you know what I really believe the custom of eating milcheks is? How it started? Maybe you'll call me a heretic for saying it. Maybe I'll have to edit it out of the tape. But I have a very, very simple explanation. See, normally, what do you eat for breakfast? You eat milcheks for breakfast, dairy foods for breakfast. But on a Shabbos and a Yontif, you miss breakfast. Why? Because you go to shul, eat for davening, or eat for davening. You go to shul. Shul lets out noontime, time for lunch. Same as breakfast. There's only one day a year that you get breakfast after davening. That's Shavuos, because it's rooted in the other custom that you stay up the entire night. Right? Shul is over 8 o'clock, and it's time for breakfast. So what's breakfast? Breakfast is Ulrich. So that's how it started. After the fact, everyone said, maybe there's a remes here, maybe there's a remes here, and there's a hint there and a hint there. But really, I think it's a practical thing that people like milk. It's after the early davening was over on Shavuos. That's my conjecture. Maybe you'll consider it heresy, but to me, I think it's the most satisfying explanation I've ever heard.
Noach knew which animals were kosher.
The Gemara says that because he learned Torah, right? The question is that Monoshach, if the Jews had that Messiah, then they wouldn't have prepared treif meals in honor of Matan Torah. If they had lost the Messiah, then it wasn't restored by Matan Torah. So either way, the verital doesn't work out. Okay, that's the first machlokes. When the Aseret Nibus were given. Now, when were the Tayag Mitzvahs given? Well, the Tayag Mitzvahs were given to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. When Moshe Rabbeinu went up after the revelation, he went up on the 7th of Sivan. It's Mavur in the Gemara and Shabbos, that's the machlokes. If the revelation was on the 6th of Sivan, he went up the next day. If the revelation was on the 7th of Sivan, he went up the same day, and he was there for 40 days. Over those 40 days, he received the Tayag Mitzvahs. Now, the question is, when he received the Tayag Mitzvahs in those 40 days, was it with all the details, or were the details added later? So here we have another machlokes from Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Klalais nemru b'Sinai, upratos ba'oil mayid," that the general principles of the Tayag Mitzvahs were given at Har Sinai, but the details were given later. Now, this doesn't refer to all the mitzvahs. It means the details of certain mitzvahs. For example, the details of the mitzvahs of Korbanos. Those were given in the Oyel Mayid. And if you look at the Chumash, you're sort of left with that impression. Because in Sefer Shemais, how much information are we given about Korbanos? Very little. Mizbeach Adama Ta'asali. Right? It says you should make a mizbeach out of earth and offer sacrifices. That's all it says. But all of a sudden in Vayikra, we have God speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu in the Oyel Mayid, and we have many parashas which talk about the various types of karbanos and the procedures to bring the karbanos. So what gets into Sefer Shemos? What gets into Sefer Vayikra? Well, the answer is that the Sefer Shemos tells us what God said to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. Sefer Vayikra tells us what God said to Moshe Rabbeinu in the Oyel Mayid. So Rabbi Shmuel has led to the conclusion that Klalais nemru b'Sinai, the generalities were said in Har Sinai, but the pratos, the details, were filled in the Oyel Mayid. Rabbi Akiva argues, and Rabbi Akiva says, Klalais upratais nemru b'Sinai, that the mitzvahs were given with their generalities and the details at Har Sinai. V'nishnu b'Oyel Mayid, and they were reviewed in the Oyel Mayid and the Shtalshu b'Arvas Mayid. So Rabbi Akiva understands that even though certain information is recorded in Sefer Shemos and certain information is recorded in Sefer Vayikra, it doesn't mean to say that that's when it was given. That's just how it's recorded in the Chumash. So sometimes it's recorded as having been said on Har Sinai, sometimes it's recorded as having been said in the Oyel Mayid, but really it's all true. Klalos upratos nemru b'Sinai, v'nishnu b'Oyel Mayid, and nishtalshu, then a third time b'Arvais Mayid. Now, with your indulgence, I'll just tell you a possibility as to what the significance of this machlokes is. The opinion of Rabbi Shmuel, at first glance, makes a lot of sense. Because we know that the laws of Karbanos would only become operative after the Mishkan was built. So why get involved in all the details until they become necessary? Maybe in a general sense, you want to tell Moshe in advance of what's coming, but the details certainly can wait. And that's apparently what Rabbi Shmuel says, that the klalais were given, the generalities were given, but the pratais were given as needed. There were certain pratais that were said in Sefer Devarim. If you look in Sefer Devarim, you'll see the mitzvahs given there generally are mitzvahs that will only pertain in Eretz Yisrael. So as the Jews are at the threshold of Eretz Yisrael, so Moshe Rabbeinu gives them final instructions that will be relevant after the crossing. At the end of the 40 years, it makes perfect sense that maybe the mitzvah in a general sense was given at Har Sinai, but the details are given as needed, and many mitzvahs will only be relevant in Eretz Yisrael, so the details are given at a later time. What is the svara of Rabbi Akiva? So I would like to offer the following conjecture. As we know that we'll talk about mitzvahs, we talked about this last week. There's the mitzvah, the law, which we're obligated to follow, but there's also the underlying tam, the rationale behind the mitzvah. And the rationale is not just icing on the cake. It's from the tam ha-mitzvahs we understand what it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. We have to live accordingly. I'll give you a mashal. We have a mitzvah of tefillin. So the mitzvah, the letter of the law, requires that we take these boxes that are made of leather, animal skin, and they contain parshias, and you put them on your arm, put them on your head, and that's how you fulfill the letter of the law of tefillin. What's the rationale behind tefillin? What's the reason for tefillin? So if you have a siddur, you can open up, you'll see there's a prayer that you say before, and the idea of tefillin is to subserviate my thoughts to the Ribono Shel Olam, my physical strength to the Ribono Shel Olam, the feelings of the heart, which are adjacent to the tefillin shel yad. In other words, it's a symbolic way of showing my total devotion to the Ribono Shel Olam. And I once pointed out an interesting thing, that the halacha is that if a person converts to Judaism and rejects a mitzvah, so the conversion is invalid. If a person says, I accept the entire Torah except this one mitzvah, it's invalid. So the question is, what if a woman would want to convert to Judaism? And the woman would say, I accept all the 613 mitzvahs except for tefillin. I don't accept tefillin. So one might say, well, she's not obligated to wear tefillin anyway, so she's accepting what she's obligated in. Would that invalidate the conversion? So I would conjecture yes. Because why? Because it's true that the letter of the law doesn't apply to her. But the idea which underlies tefillin is equally applicable to a woman. The idea that her thoughts and her physical strength and her emotional feelings should be devoted to Ribono Shel Olam applies across the board. For whatever reason, women don't perform mitzvahs ascesis man groma. So therefore, in a practical sense, she doesn't put on tefillin. But the ideal which underlies tefillin is equally relevant to her. This, by the way, is an answer to a famous question. It says in the Gemara in Yevamos that when Rus and Naomi had their famous dialogue, and we have that beautiful poetry where Rus says that wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you walk, I will walk. Your nation is my nation, and your God is my God. So we look at it as poetry, but the Gemara in Yevamos says it really was half of a very, very technical conversation. Because Naomi was informing Rus as to some of the laws that are relevant to Jews. This is part of the process of conversion. The modianos of mixus mitzvahs kalas and mixus mitzvahs chamuras. You inform the person of a sampling of mitzvahs, and the person has to accept. So, for example, Naomi said, "Aslam tchum Shabbos." There's an issue of tchum Shabbos. You can't walk more than 2,000 miles beyond the outskirts of the city. Basher teilchi elech. Where you go, I'll go. You only walk this far, I'll only walk that far. And then she said, Aslan yichud. You're not allowed to be alone with a man, not your husband. Basher talimi olim. Where you sleep, I'll sleep. You don't sleep with a man, I don't sleep with a man. And so on and so forth. She was answering all the questions. So one of the questions was, Mifkadina Tayag Mitzvahs. We're obligated to keep Tayag Mitzvahs. This is Amech Ami. Your nation is my nation. You keep Tayag Mitzvahs, I'll keep Tayag Mitzvahs. So Aslan Avedis Kechavim. We can't practice idolatry. Your God is my God. So she was answering all the questions. But one of the questions was, we're obligated in 613 mitzvahs. So the question is asked, who's obligated in 613 mitzvahs? Nobody. There's no one person who has all 613 mitzvahs. Women don't have mitzvahs cessations on gramas. That's the 14 that they don't have. So, what does it mean we're chayiv and tayag mitzvahs? The answer is that a woman Everybody's chayv in Taryag mitzvahs. The fact that the letter of the law exempts people from certain mitzvahs. So there are mitzvahs that only Kehanim do in practice, or only Leviim do in practice, only men do in practice, only women do in practice, only a king does in practice, only the king's subjects do in practice is irrelevant. But the ideas which underlie the mitzvahs are applicable to everybody, all 613 mitzvahs. And therefore, there has to be a Kabbalistic acceptance of that. Now, when we want to understand the Taryag mitzvahs, do we just examine the mitzvah in a general sense, or do the details become important? Are the details important? There's a fascinating Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. It's a very, very odd Rambam. If anyone would say it, not in the Rambam's name, you'd think it was heresy. But the Rambam says something very surprising. The Rambam's talking about korbanos, and he makes the observation, you know, that different Yomim Tovim, you bring different numbers of korbanos. So, for example, Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, Shavuos, the korban musaf is 2 parim, 1 ayil, 7 kvasim. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Shemini Atzeres, it's 1 par, 1 ayil, 7 kvasim. Sukkot, the number of parim varies. You have 2 elim, 14 kvasim. You have all sorts of different numbers of korbanos. So what's the significance of that? Like, why is it on this yom tov this number, this yom tov this number? So the Rambam says that there's no answer to that question. The Rambam writes that if I would give you a different number, you'd ask me why that number. So there has to be a number. So therefore, the Torah picked the number. The Rambam says there's no reason behind the numbers. Now, of course, the Rambam is hard to understand, because why does there have to be a number? Like, why can't I go to God and say, listen, bring a carbon, whatever you want. You know, a lot of animals, fewer animals. Like, why must there be a precise number? I don't answer that question. This is the Rambam says. Now, the Rambam brings a proof to this idea that the details don't necessarily have reasons. They could be arbitrary. And he goes in a famous medrash that says, what does the Baruch Hu care whether shechita is min hatzavar, min ha'iref, when you slaughter an animal, whether you slaughter from the back of the neck, you slaughter from the bottom of the neck. Torah was given to refined people, which the Rambam takes to mean it's a sign of obedience. God tells us to do it a certain way, and this is a test of our obedience. So the Rambam says, you see that the details make no difference. In other words, the mitzvah of shechita in a general sense is the obligation to slaughter animals before you eat them. Whether it's this way or whether it's that way, really makes no difference. Now the Ramban in Chumash brings this medrash and brings a different shot in the medrash, which opens the possibility that the Ramban disagrees. And the Ramban holds that the pratim are significant. Certainly, if you look at later works, just to give one example, Reb Shamshon von Hirsch's Perish in the Torah, as you see that he takes the details very seriously, and he works out very elaborate schemes to explain exactly what these animals symbolize, what the numbers of animals symbolize. He does this for all the mitzvahs. And sometimes, these are very, very, very lengthy explanations, but they're significant. I'll just mention a very interesting thing, that the famous Baal Mussar, Reb Elya Lapian, who didn't live to witness the high-tech revolution of our times, but did live when the transistor radio was introduced. So he said that, looking at the transistor radio, that anyone who understands the transistor radio understands why a pair of tefillin, if one letter is shapen, why the tefillin are puzzled. Because you look at this thing, if there's a single circuit broken, something defective in a single transistor, a connection, then the whole radio won't work. So what's the pella that if you have a pair of tefillin and there's one letter and there's a kuso shel yud missing, what's so amazing that the tefillin don't work? Of course it's that way. In other words, the average user of the radio doesn't understand. Or today the average user of the computer, right, doesn't understand, like, why is it so important that every circuit be? Because we deal with it on a much more removed level. In other words, to me, a computer is like a black box. What's going on inside, I have no idea. Maybe there's a little chipmunk in there who's running the works. But it works. I know how to use it. but I have no idea as to the inner workings. My car is the same thing, and I have no idea. I drive it. I can use the car. I don't have to know exactly how it works to be able to use it. So mitzvah objects are the same thing. In other words, I use my film, I use my lulav. Right? Why everything has to be exactly the way it is, I don't have a clue. But I'm sure there's a good reason. But in any case, it may be this is the issue. If the mitzvahs are going to be operative later, why were they given in advance? And this relates to this topic we spoke about last week, which is the idea that the mitzvahs have relevance even before they become operative in practice. Because the mitzvahs have ideas and ideals which underlie them. And therefore, even before the mitzvahs are given, we have to know them, we have to understand them, we have to delve into them, because from them we understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu values, what He cherishes, what He wants from us, etc. Right? They may be relevant in practice only down the road. So the question is, what do we need to know before the mitzvahs are operative? From what do we derive the ideals and ideas? Rabbi Shmuel says it's from the klolos. The protais, as the Rambam says, may be arbitrary. So of course, when the mitzvah becomes relevant in practice, then you have to have the protais. But in the meantime, you need the klolos, because you have to know what it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from you, what are the values that He recognizes, etc. Rabbi Akiva says no, that it's not enough to know the klolos. It's really only from the pratais and the klolos that you get a clear picture of exactly what the Ratzon Hashem is, what are His ideals. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva holds klolos through pratais and Rabbi Sinai. Now, we know that Rashi and Chumash takes sides in this issue, and he brings the famous Teres Kehanim, which learns out from the halachas of Shemitah and Yovel, that klolos through pratais and Rabbi Sinai, because we know that in a very, very general sense, the mitzvah of Shemitah is in Parshas Mishpatim, Vashmias Tishmetenu Natashta, V'ochlu Avyernei Amcha V'yisram Techel Chayas Asad. It's one single pasuk. In Parshas Bahar, in the Oyel Mayit, Parshas Bahar, we have a much more extensive elaboration of the laws of Shemitah and Yovel. And it says in Parshas Bahar that these are the mitzvahs that were given in Bahar Sinai. That's why it's called Parshas Bahar. So you see that when it comes to Shemitah and Yovel, the klolos and the pratais were said b'Sinai, and from here we derive a general principle that just like these mitzvahs were said b'Sinai, so likewise all the mitzvahs were said b'Sinai, the klal of the prat. In other words, Rashi takes the position of Rabbi Akiva. The question is that of all the illustrations the Torah could have given, why does it give the example of Shemitah and Yovel? Well, that's the question. Ma'anim Shemitah Eitzal Sinai. So it's true, we learn from Shemitah and Yovel that all the mitzvahs were given the chlal of the prat at Sinai. But why are these the two mitzvahs that are discussed? Now, if you look at the Gemara Kedushin, the Gemara Kedushin says like this: the Gedolah Talmud, learning is very great. Learning is very great, because we know that with regards to many mitzvahs, right, the mitzvah was given many years before it became operative in practice. And the Gemara makes a cheshbon. The two last mitzvahs to kick in are the mitzvahs of Shemitah and Yovel. Because you have the 40 years in the Midbar, the 14 years of Kibush v'Chiluk, and then Shemitah is only 7 years after that. Yovel is only 50 years after that. Right? So if you do the addition, 40 plus 14 is 54, and another 50 years, so it's 104 years. So it was many, many years till Yovel became operative, but Shemitah was the next to last. So therefore, that's why the Torah picked those two, because the Torah is making the following point: that the pratim are not merely important because they tell us how to carry out the mitzvah. The pratim are important because it's from the pratim we understand what the underlying ideal is. So therefore, which examples did the Torah pick? It picked the mitzvahs which would be put into practice the latest as possible, and those mitzvahs the Torah selected to tell me the details. To tell me that the relevance of the details isn't simply because they tell you how to implement the mitzvah in practice. The relevance of the details is that we derive from them the underlying ideas of the mitzvah. So this is, again, a machlokes of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Again, Rabbi Shmuel says that the klolos were said in Har Sinai and the pratos by Almayid. Rabbi Akiva says klolos, pratos, and Rabbi Sinai. Now, regarding the text of the Sefer Torah, There's a third machlokas. This is a machlokas in Gittin and Daf Samach, with the Torah Megillah Nitna, or Torah Chasuma Nitna. Was the Torah given in scrolls, meaning in installments, or was it given complete? Meaning, was it dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of the 40 years? Now, this, by the way, is very important to understand this distinction between the Taryag Mitzvahs and the text of the Torah. The text of the Torah includes historical information too. Now, some people are operating under the misconception that Moshe Rabbeinu got the Sefer Torah in the 40 days in Har Sinai. Well, then we'd have a Back to the Future problem. In other words, that Moshe Rabbeinu has stories in his Sefer Torah of things that didn't happen yet. So, like, could Moshe Rabbeinu have avoided, the various things? Could he not hit the rock? I mean, he certainly had the record of that. This time travel is a very, very serious problem. I don't know if anyone's ever worked out the rules for time travel.
Not recently.
In many books, many people have explored the possibility, right? The problem is, like, what can you change? Is it possible to change anything? And so on and so forth. But there's a whole genre of book. I mean, The Time Machine is the most famous one. But there's a more recent book, The Time Traveler's Wife, right? Where also all these people have tried to work out these issues. What would time travel involve? But in any case, we're not getting into the issue. Moshe Rabbeinu did not have the stories in the Torah before they happened. In other words, he had the Taryag Mitzvahs were given in Har Sinai. And that's the Machlekes. Klolos, Pratos, we'll say like Rebbe Akiva, Klolos, Pratos, then moved to Sinai. In those 40 days, he got the Klolos and the Pratos. But the historical parts of the Torah he certainly only received after the fact. So the question is, was it in installments? As each episode occurred, that's when he was given the text, and then it was really put together at the end of the 40 years? Or was it at the end of the 40 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictated the Torah from the beginning of Bereshis to the Lamed of La'inei Kol Yisrael? And these machlokes, we don't have a hachra in the Gemara, but we have a hachra in the Rishonim. Rashi, which already mentioned, says apparently that in this machlokes of Rebbe Akiva and Rebbe Shmuel, we go like Rebbe Akiva. He paskins that Klolos and Pratos Nemru B'Sinai. And the other machlokes with the Torah Chasuma Nitna, the Torah Megillah Nitna, the Ramban in his Akdama to Chumash is machriya like the opinion the Torah Chasuma Nitna. He says that the Psukim, the simple reading of the Psukim, lends itself more to that position. Really, one of the knotty problems is really how to understand a pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu read the Sefer Abris. So what is the Sefer Abris? So Rashi says the Sefer Abris is the Chumash up to Parshas Mishpatim. And Moshe had that before. Obviously, the Ramban speaks out that if you hold Torah Chasuma Nitna, the Sefer Abris must be something else. So the Ramban says perhaps it's just a list of the mitzvahs that were already given, right? Like the Asharas of the Reb Sadigan wrote, and so on and so forth. Of course, that relates to a different shaila, whether that reading of the Sefer Abris took place after the 40 days, or took place before the 40 days. So Machlekes between Chazal and the Ramban who says that it referred to the listing of the mitzvahs is L'shitasa, who holds that it took place after the 40 days, so Moshe already had the Taryag mitzvahs. It's a complicated question, but again, we'll put that in the back burner when we Parshas Mishpatim. But this is the machlokes when the text was given. So these are the three machlokes that are relevant. So again, so the Aseres HaDibros, either Vav Sivan or Zayin Sivan. The Taryag mitzvahs will assume, like Rebbe Akiva, that during the 40 days, Klolos Upratos Nemru B'Sinai. The text of the Sefer Torah, which includes not only the mitzvahs but the historical information, that will assume, like Ramban is Machriya, the Torah Chasuma Nitna, that it was dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of the 40 years, right? And of course, the only problem, but this is a problem which the Chazal himself point out, is that the Torah contains a record of the death of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So who wrote that? So the Gemara says, it's machlokes. One Mandarma says it was written by Yoshua, but the Gemara says, how can that be? if Moshe said L'kayach Sefer Torah, as that take the Sefer Torah, certainly it must have been complete at that point. So he says that the other Maldarma says that Moshe wrote the last 8 psukim b'dema, with tears in his eyes. Now, this is an amazing thing, by the way. This is a psychological insight. That, look, we all know we're going to die, right? Everybody. No one escapes it. The world will die sooner or later. So okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu was 120, right? So when the Torah dictated him the account of his death, he cried. He knew it was going to happen. It was inevitable. But even so, in other words, to face the prospect of your own death is very, very, very painful. Even you're 120 years old, you're Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, that the Gemara says that until the very end, I guess he had hope that maybe the Gzeir would be annulled, maybe be able to cross in Eretz Yisrael. And finally, when the Rebbe dictated him to write in the Sefer Torah the account of his death, that's it. And Moshe Rabbeinu knew it was final. There was not going to be any change. He was going to be buried there in Chutz La'aretz, and therefore he was b'dama. So this is the three machlokes. So now let's see how the Rambam rules on these issues. The Rambam says, "Kol ha-mitzvahs shenitnu lo l'Moshe b'Sinai." All the mitzvahs that were given to Moshe on Sinai, the Perusha Nitnu, were given along with their Perush, along with their explanation. So this seems to be following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Because like Rabbi Shmuel, that Klala is Nemru b'Sinai u'pratas b'ayal mayid, so the mitzvahs weren't given with their Perush. The mitzvah was given, but the Perush, the rules, the guidelines, the definitions, may have been given later in the Ayal Mayid. So the Rambam is taking the position that the mitzvahs that were given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai were given with their Perushim. That seems to be following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The Klalos who practiced them Rabbi Sinai. Shinemar, as it says, when God called Moshe up to Har Sinai, he said, "Come up," and what will happen? I'm going to give you 3 things. The Luchai Sa'evan, the stone tablets of the Aseret Sedibris. I will give you the Torah, and I'll give you the mitzvah. So what are these 3 different things? The Luchai Sa'evan is self-explanatory. We understand what that is. What is the Torah and the mitzvah? So the Rambam explains. Torah is Torah Shebechsav. Torah is Torah Shebechsav. Mitzvah is the Perusha, and mitzvah is the Perush. HaTorah v'ha-mitzvah. Torah is the Torah Shebechsav, and the mitzvah is the Perush. Now, what does it mean the Torah Shebechsav? Was it written at that point? So, wait 1 second. Let's read a little bit further. V'tzivonu la'asayis HaTorah al pi ha-mitzvah. And we are commanded to perform the Torah according to the mitzvah. Because we are commanded that we have to fulfill the Torah in accordance with the mitzvah, with the Perush. U'mitzvah zu hi hanikras Torah Sheba'al Peh, and this is called Torah Sheba'al Peh. Kol HaTorah, the entire Torah, kasva Moshe Rabbeinu Kaidem Shiyomus b'ksav yado. He wrote it in his handwriting. V'nosno sefer l'chol shevet b'shevet. He gave a sefer Torah to each tribe. The Sefer Echad Nasnuhu Ba'aron La'ed. One Sefer was put in the Aron as a testimony. Shenemar, as it says, L'kayach HaSefer HaTorah HaZayis, take the Sefer Torah, most of the Levium, V'samtem Oso, Mitzad Aron Bris Hashem, put it alongside the Aron, Hashem Elokechem, V'haya Sham B'chol La'ed, and will be there for a testimony. What does it mean, a testimony? This was the check. As we know that when you write Sefer Torah, the question is, there can be errors in copying, and sometimes you don't know if you have an accurate text. But as long as that Sefer Torah, the original Sefer Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, was available, you could always check. You could compare your Sefer Torah to that Sefer Torah. So Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 13 Sefer Torah. 12 were given to the Shvatim. 1 was put in the Aron La'ed. Now those 12 Sefer Torah were copied many times over. Let's keep in mind, there's a mitzvah in the Torah that every Jew should have his own Sefer Torah. Right? We don't fulfill this mitzvah nowadays. Why is a good question. Why is a good question. Some quote the Rosh, who seems to say that, well, I shouldn't say he seems to say it. I'll tell you what the Rosh says. The Rosh comments regarding the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. He says, nowadays, the mitzvah, people should have other svarim. People should write Mishnayos, this is for printing, remember, Mishnayos and Gemaras and Pirushim, because we learn from those svarim. So some people think that the Rosh is going to explain why we don't do the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah nowadays. And he says, because we don't learn from Sefer Torah anymore. Right? So the mitzvah is to have the svarim that you need for learning. And since we learn from Mishnayos and Gemaras, etc., those are the mitzvahs we should have. And therefore the argument goes that nowadays, since we use printed svarim, there's no mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. That's very questionable what the Rosh really meant that. Because it's true that in addition you should also have the svarim that we learn from. But a mitzvah of the Torah should change. If the mitzvah is to have a Sefer Torah, so why should that change? So whether the Rosh is answering this question or not is not clear. The Shekasari is a true, but there are other reasons why. But Al Kapanim, certainly at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu this was fulfilled. So the Sefer Torah were copied, one from the other, and then from that copy, other copies were made. If from that copy, other copies were made. You could have a Sefer Torah, which is a 10th generation of Sefer Torah. Errors could have crept in. So you needed that check, that aid, to verify whether your copy was accurate.
So was there a time when everybody did have the Sefer Torah?
That's what it seems. It seems like that.
And there's a value of the Sefer Torah?
Probably. No, it's not like nowadays. Nowadays it's a very expensive thing, a Sefer Torah, but in those days, I guess it was,
people would write their own.
More affordable. People would write their own. But in any case, so it seems that the Rambam seems to say that the entire Torah, Kol HaTorah, he wrote a Kodem Shiyonos. So it seems the Rambam is taking the position that Torah Chasuma Nitna, that the entire Torah was dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu before his death, not like the opinion of Megillah Nitna. He's taking this position. So if so, it's very funny. Go back to their earlier statement that when God told Moshe, "Come up to Har Sinai, I'll give you the Torah of our mitzvah," he says, "Torah is Torah shebechsav." We had Torah, the written Torah. It wasn't written yet. It wasn't going to be written until the end of the 40 years. So what does it mean that the Torah is the Torah shebechsav? It means like this, and we'll end with this, and we'll call it a week. Let me give you a marshal to illustrate it. There was a style of certain svarim that were written, even in relatively recent times, that were written in the manner of text and commentary. They were written by the same author, the text and the commentary. He would write a text and write his own commentary to his own text. For example, one sefer that comes to mind is a sefer that was written by the Ramchal, called Klach Pischei Chochmah, the 138 Gates to Wisdom. So if you open that sefer, you'll see that there are 138 very, very short paragraphs. Some of them are only sentences. And then below the line, there's an extensive commentary on each of the 138 paragraphs, where he explains the meaning of this word and this phrase and the significance and the sources and so on and so forth. So it's a commentary to the text. Now he wrote both. It isn't like there's a Gemara and Rashi wrote a commentary, there's a Chumash, Rashi wrote a commentary, or there's a Shulchan Aruch and the Mr. Ru wrote a commentary. In other words, the same author wrote the text and commentary. So what's the point? Why do it in two parts? The answer is this. The answer is because the text is much more concise, more efficient. It's more easily committed to memory. Now, it could be that your first time going through it, you don't fully appreciate the meaning of the text unless you study the commentary. Then you understand why he used this word and what he was getting at and so on and so forth. But the second time around, you don't need the commentary. The second time around, all you need is the text. And as you read the text, as you review the text, everything makes sense. Oh, that's why this word is used, that's why this sentence is used. So it's a very efficient way of teaching. That's what the Torah was given. The Torah was given in the manner of text and commentary. And when the Rambam says Torah shebechsav, he doesn't mean that it was written at that point. Both were oral. but it was a text and a commentary, meaning that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave a mitzvah to Moshe Rabbeinu, he gave it in a wording which ultimately was written in the Sefer Torah. So, for example, when Moshe Rabbeinu was given the mitzvah of Basar B'chalav, the text was Lo Savashel Gedi B'chalev Imo. That was the text. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him the commentary. That what do I mean by Gedi? Do I mean specifically a young goat? What about a young lamb? What about a young cow? What about a chicken? What about a fish? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, Gedi here doesn't mean specifically a goat, but it means a mammal that nurses from its mother. Not birds, not fish, right? But including calves and cows and so on and so forth. Chalev, what does milk mean? Right? Does it have to be Chalev Imo, the milk of its own mother? Could be the milk of another animal, etc. So God explained yes. Right? What does it mean Lo Savasha, not to cook? What's included in cooking? Cooking, baking, frying, smoking, right? Exact definition of cooking. And what does it mean? What is prohibited over here? Is it only the cooking which is prohibited? What about the eating? What about driving benefit? So we know it's repeated 3 times. Tell me there's Nisr Bishul, there's Nisr Achil, there's Nisr Hana. These are the pirushim. These are the explanations. But the text are those few words. Lo Savasha Gedi B'chalev Imo. 5 words. That's the text. And then you have the commentary to the text. Now, the examples I gave are just several aspects. I'm sure the commentaries are much more extensive. We have in your day a whole Bilchos Basar B'chalav. Undoubtedly, the commentaries were more elaborate. But that's how they were given. They were given in this way: text and commentary.
Maybe Moshe had a text. Didn't write it down. It's Torah, Kasuma, but he had a text.
Yeah, maybe.
And maybe as he taught it in Midbar, here's the text.
Maybe. But it wasn't the Sefer Torah. It wasn't the Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah was at the end of the 40 years. But there was text and commentary. And that's a very efficient way of teaching, because this way you don't have to remember all the details, right? You have that little concise text, and as you review the text, you understand exactly, what this word means, what this means, what's the general idea and the principle. So this is how it was facilitated. Ultimately, at the end of the 40 years, the historical account of God's giving the text to Moshe was given. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, so on and so forth, is a historical account of God giving that text to the Moshe Rabbeinu. That was incorporated into the Sefer Torah. The commentary remained oral. So once the Torah was written, so then the commentary is Torah Sheba'al Peh and the text is Torah Sheba'al. But initially, it could be that both were Ba'al Peh. Okay, we'll hold here. We'll continue Be'ez Hashem next week.